screen. I can't share screen, but hello everyone. This is the February 15th, 2024 meeting for the Carpenter Working Group. And yeah, this is at 2 p.m. and we'll go ahead and get started. So some of the project updates, we released version 34 last week. Version 34 is quite a huge release for us and a big milestone for the project.
Hey Nick,
It's the,
so
yeah,
just because you said you couldn't share a screen, sorry to interrupt. You can now, I think. I just made you the co-host.
I think it might have been a permissions thing. I
Yeah,
haven't,
I just made you a host.
I mean like a computer permissions, like
Oh,
restart
it's
my
on
computer.
permissions.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. If you don't mind sharing it, I can just talk while you're sharing.
sure. That's fine.
I should have gotten this figured out beforehand. But yeah, so version 34 was a big milestone for the project. It was our first release after I guess it was our second release for the version V1 Beta 1 APIs. The second release where only the V1 API, V1 Beta 1 APIs are available. And so that includes a lot of the stuff that we were talking about in the last working group, which was the spot consolidation. And then there's disruption budgets and a lot of improvements on disruption performance. Um, yeah, I guess I will copy over the last ones. So Um, right now for the project, we're still working on a path to V1. Jonathan, do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. Yeah, kind of similar to what I said last time we met. We are still like formalizing this laundry list that's here. So there's like this issue where you can add additional ideas where we're thinking for things that we're thinking about scoping into V1 work. We're still kind of formalizing the roadmap there. Ideally, the goal is to have a roadmap RFC that will go up and then also to have an API RFC that will go up, which the roadmap RFC is going to necessarily talk about the API to some degree, but considering the API decisions are kind of larger, they'll probably end up being separate. Um, this exists both on the Kubernetes SIGs Carpenter repo as well as the AWS provider repo. So both the links are here. I think if Azure was here and wanted to share, and they were also considering doing a similar thing, then they could definitely chime in as well. But we're kind of coordinating the two releases. So when we're going to formalize the V1 APIs and release like the V1 version of the libraries, we're also going to, at least the AWS provider side is going to V1 itself as well. So um, yeah, up to this point, I think there's some stuff that's already tracked inside of the other issues in the repo. A bunch of chores for technical debt that we need to clean up, and then a larger conversation on observability improvements. I know Garvin was kind of interested in this. We were talking about it in the Carpenter Slack channel. Just overall improvements to logging, eventing, status conditions, giving better recommendations on how we're going to tell users in general to monitor Carpenter. Um, deduping some of our metrics that currently sit in there that are not, I guess, different enough, in my opinion. So that will also come alongside with this as well.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Moving on to the next one. Elmico, do you have any updates for the Carpenter Cappy stuff?
Hey, um, I think the only update so far is that I think we're getting closer to having kind of an agreed upon architecture for how we want to integrate the two. At least we've been talking about it for a few weeks now, and I haven't like really heard any pushback about it. And I'm working to get kind of the foundation for the repo set up. So I'm hoping to have the repo created within the next couple weeks, but that's about it in terms of updates.
That'd be in the Kubernetes SIGs org.
Yeah, that'll be in Kubernetes SIGs, and we're proposing to call it like Carpenter dash provider dash cluster dash API. If we could figure out how to get more dashes in there, I would. But
What's the precedent for like not that we have a problem, but I'm curious if you need our plus one on the creation of that repo because it's like, or is that just like a SIG decision?
so when it comes time, I will create an issue that I guess contribx will act upon. And at that point, it'll probably be good to get like this community's plus one and cluster APIs plus one, since it's, the overlap of two namespaces basically.
Okay.
But that's what I would expect at least.
Right. And then the Carpenter docs neutrality. I know we talked a little bit about this. I don't know if David's in the call, but I know that Jonathan and David went to some of the SIG docs stuff. Was there anything to call out for the project here about that? I guess the question would be for you, Jonathan, because
Yeah, I don't have enough update, honestly. I think David has
okay.
been kind of driving a lot of this work. The tech discussion was it was like fruitful in some ways and not in others, I think. But it was at least I think he was confirming on like direction from like a technical perspective on how exactly we want to split out this, like which areas we want to split out and which areas we don't want to split out, and how we're going to design it maybe in a slightly similar way to how Cappy does their documentation and different in other ways. Um, I'm still not fully clear on the whole vision, so I'm hoping he'll keep driving this discussion. It's definitely getting to the point where I'm thinking that if we really want to drive towards a solution here, we may just need a separate, like intentional working group around this specific item. Because I still don't, or maybe like some discussion at like KubeCon for those people that are going to be there. Like I don't quite know what the right answer is here, but I also am not like a docs person.
I guess we'll get more information about that in the future. Cool. All right. Those were the big project updates and related project updates. I guess we'll start with community questions. I think it's David. Do you want to talk about your question?
Yeah. Um, I had posted about this, I think, in the Kubernetes Slack a week or so ago. Um, I'm maintaining a project that does Kubernetes simulation. So it's simulating parts of the control plane, which includes auto scaling. Um, and this is sort of built on top of Quack, the Kubernetes without kubelet project. Um, the way that cluster, and so essentially what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to configure the autoscaler with the instance types that would actually be inside a like production cluster that I'm trying to simulate or something like that. So the way that cluster autoscaler, the Quack provider for cluster autoscaler does this is it just has a config map that where you can dump in uh, the node specifications for all the different types of nodes that you want to appear in your like virtual cluster. And so I was wondering if something similar to this would be of interest or of use for Carpenter, because I think right now Carpenter just hard codes like a single, like a not a single instance type, but it has like a bunch of sort of fake instances that it generates. So just kind of wanted
Yeah.
to chat with folks and see what their thoughts were.
Yeah. So I'll start on that. Is that the I guess initial design of the clock provider was just to have like you're saying the hard coded list of instance types. They use some fake labels that kind of replicate some of the labels that I think both Azure and AWS implement, which are like a CPU label, a memory label, a size label, and a type label.
Mhm.
Is that something that you think you can kind of use to as part of like labels within the instance types that you were thinking of suggesting? And that
I
you kind
mean,
of want to just rename the format and how the instance types or names are generated?
no, so I was thinking more like a user would be able to specify like, uh, you know, I've got a C5 8x large like fake node in my cluster, or I don't actually know how Azure names their instances, but you could like have a instance that looks like an Azure node or something along those lines. But it would be user specified. It wouldn't necessarily be a part of Karpenter.
Yeah, I guess in that sense, would you want it to have all the injected AWS or injected Azure labels too?
Um, I think you could. I mean, I think the way that I would do it is like the user would just provide a node spec, and then the users could stick whatever labels they wanted on that node spec, like a Kubernetes YAML blob that says this is what the node looks like. These are the labels that it has on it. These are the like reported capacities that it has, and so forth.
Yeah, yeah. One way I was, I guess, thinking about that is that in terms of like well-known scheduling requirements, is that we use the like well-known labels
Hmm.
within like Carpenter Core to allow people to, define what they want in their node pool requirements,
Right.
and that the like for AWS we inject some specific AWS ones, and Azure does the same,
Hmm.
and Guac does the same with just a smaller set. Um, One way I'd kind of like to see that if it has like some non-hardcode list of instance types is just like you have like maybe JSON is just like straight up just a name and then what the values of these labels would be.
Hmm.
And I think if those labels aren't the full set of labels that you want to use to express the nodes, which maybe would be just, a copy of like the AWS instance type names, then
Hmm.
I think we could definitely include that as part of it and, you know, propagate that change to the existing hard coded and then also allow some injected JSON to get parsed as the list of instance types.
Okay.
We just
Um,
discover the requirements from the dynamic config map and then use that. Is that what you're saying, Nick? Like use whatever we discover from the config map to just hydrate that list? Yeah.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, that's one way to do it as well. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I was thinking, uh, like I would just sort of copy the config map format from what cluster autoscaler is using, um,
How
so that you
similar is the
could.
format to like this kind of, because like you can imagine this is the instance type struct that we use under
Mhm.
the hood. I'm not sure how much you looked at this, but like you could imagine this is effectively like this is the interface we give back is like when you
Mhm.
call get instance types, this is what we return is like an array of this basically.
Mhm.
So you can imagine a JSON object that looks exactly like this, serialized effectively.
Right.
Is like Cass's format? I was trying to track it down, but it's hard to do so on a call. Like,
Uh, it's
does it look?
literally just the Kubernetes node spec. So it's the like
Oh,
node spec in the Kubernetes API.
got it. Okay.
And I'm assuming that Carpenter is somehow like it's querying Kubernetes API server to get those, or like there's some sort of translation from the node spec into uh, Carpenter.
Yeah, I mean, it's effectively we're going to whatever cloud provider API and then grabbing all this information.
Right.
So I get how like a node spec would be not like also useful because at the end of the day, this is going to translate to a node that
Mhm.
looks like X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
Um,
But
I
yeah, I
guess
could like we could include a JSON blob for this instance type, uh, if that would be easier to do. I'm not too concerned about the specific format.
yeah, because otherwise we'd have to do conversion
Mhm.
between that thing and this thing. It's probably cleaner if you just say like either we return our hard-coded set from the get instance types call, or we return whatever is specified in the config map that also has the same formatting.
Okay. Um, so it sounds like broadly people aren't opposed to the idea. Um, and I'm happy to like take a look and try to put together a PR for this. Um,
Yeah, works with me.
okay, cool.
Before we continue on, is there anyone able to take notes? Yeah, I guess we'll just see if someone starts typing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do it.
Uh, okay, thanks a bunch. All right. Garvin, wanna go ahead?
Yeah. Um,
not completely sure if this PR is the right thing, but then we're looking into I guess ODCR, or I guess capacity reservations in AWS side of Carpenter. I know that right now we don't support that, like attaching the capacity reservation to the launch template within Carpenter. I'm wondering, and I guess this specific issue has some I guess feature related to like prioritization of like capacity reservation and then so on. I realize I haven't looked at that code that much, but then my first thought is, can we just support it? And then the second would be like, we can look into the prioritization. I think I'm wrong in this comment saying like, I thought there's only one launch template per node class, but I think that's wrong. I'm assuming that's how you evaluate how to pick up like ARM instances and stuff like that. I'm not completely sure. I haven't looked at that code that well. So in theory, you can still put the capacity reservation as one of the launch template that you iterate through. Um, I'm just looking to support it, but happy to look into prioritization of that too. And I
What's
guess,
the
yeah.
what's the goal with supporting capacity reservations? Out of curiosity, is this just to facilitate not losing instances whenever like reconciliation occurs, like if you're replacing instances during a node rollout?
Yeah, I guess it's not even that. It's more like during like high peak seasons that we know they're coming up, we like a baseline reservation of like nodes for certain services.
Mhm.
By attaching the capacity reservation again, kind of guarantees that that number of nodes in those zones exists, but we also want the isolation of those nodes to just this specific service. So tying in the node pool allows us to be like, here's a node pool for this service, and this service will get guaranteed capacity on these type of instance types, and kind of no one else can kind of touch that. And we want to support that. And then in general, like the type of nodes we kind of use is slightly like exotic. We run on like metal nodes only, and we
Mm.
need some baseline capacity because we have hit like capacity insufficient capacity quite often. So we can, if we can bring in that base capacity and then fall through into other instances, that would be great. But then we just need some way to do that.
Would Carpenter also need to prefer to schedule, like prefer to fill that capacity reservation up to ensure you're not just like wasting money on things you're not using?
Kind
So if
of.
the
I think we can right now we can do that with this no pool prioritization and weights. So we
Oh,
can
that
already
makes
do
sense.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but
Okay.
then I think this asks specifically this issue asks for like that within a no pool, which I'm happy to do, but I'm happy to wait because we can do it without it being within same no pool. I guess it's my priority is supporting ODCR or sorry, capacity reservation associated to launch templates in Carpenter. And then secondary to that would be prioritization. And I guess my answer is like, is that fine? Is that something we are happy to go forward with? Or yeah.
So I got one question, which is if you have an ODCR, what's the need to have Carpenter provision that ad hoc? Like, why not just scale up your ODCR ahead of time for your cluster?
Be it's the isolation aspect where we want certain services to have prioritization on a specific instance type.
Couldn't you spin up the capacity ahead of time and then just like taint them and nodes select against them so that they
we It makes it harder just because we have multiple shards, like multiple clusters of Kubernetes in the same
Hmm.
account. So any coordination across shards with Carpenter, and it's slightly harder to do, if that makes sense.
So if I'm understanding correctly, it's you want to share an ODCR across
We
clusters.
don't, we don't, but then we
Oh,
want
okay.
to guarantee a specific instance type because like we're talking about like M5, like 12 or like 24x large, and we don't want anyone else to grab that. We want this service only to grab all this within this capacity, like within this pool of capacity, and no one else
You're
grabs it.
so you're really looking for the ability to tie like taints and node selectors to a particular like ODCR so that you can.
Essentially, yeah, essentially, somewhat like that. It's a little bit
Yeah.
more complicated, but it's like just because it's cross shard too, so teams might not always work. But then, yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
guess I'm a little unclear on the if you're not sharing
Hmm.
ODCR cross cluster,
Hmm.
then why
But
can't you
that's
spin MNG based ODCR.
Sorry, what G?
Sorry, manage no group based ODCR that uses
Management.
static capacity. Is it just like you want to use a single control point? Oh, are you guys? That's right. You guys are not running on EKS, right?
Yeah, that's the issue. We're not in KS, so there's like
Yeah.
no
Okay,
grouping there.
now
It literally like free flowing EC2. So like there's no way to like isolate it. Yeah, so that's the issue.
that's right. So you'd have to like literally just spin up instances on your own effectively.
Yeah. Yes, is that yeah, or like just ban that instance from everyone else kind of thing. And so it's complicated. Whereas being able to associate the capacity reservation just to a node pool is actually would do this for us.
That makes it clear. Yeah, because I think our general recommendation has been like, okay, if you just need to isolate the capacity to a single cluster, like
Right.
you can use no groups in EKS to just like pre-spin your capacity.
Right.
This also has some overlap, I guess, with manual node provisioning in Carpenter, because if we just supported the ability to specify a certain number of replicas, like, I mean, you could, like, it
It
depends on whether you
could.
want to pre-spin or ad hoc spin
Right,
up
right,
your
right.
for the ODCR. You're already paying for it, right? So it's
Right.
like, yeah.
Yeah. So that's possible too, but then I don't think manual that's also like
Yeah, you
farther
still
like
need the launch template. Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
I guess my step was gonna just write a quick design doc. I don't think that's too complicated, like being able to pass through like a capacity reservation group through the node pool, but just want to get like a pulse check done. Ignoring the prioritization, just
Yeah,
being
it
able
would
to
be in the
associate it.
node
It's
class, right?
Sorry,
you're
what?
gonna. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was gonna. This is gonna run into problems with like not being able to increase the ODCR amount, like capacity reservation dynamically, right? Because it's not possible to know what's available on AWS's backend.
It's not
Because like
ex
yeah, you're using your own credentials to communicate with like the AWS APIs, but this is like the classic problem that like we've experienced using ODCRs is that I can't always increase the ODCR because if there's not enough instances in the background, the request just fails to increase it.
right. I guess from our use case, at least specifically around like reservation, is that we don't dynamically update that. Like
Hmm.
we just ask for it ahead of time as part of forecasting into the hot season.
Hmm.
So we don't usually adjust that until like after, say, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, or something like that. And then we either kill the capacity or whatnot. So that's less of an issue for us, but then that's definitely something interesting that I've never encountered, but possibly something that we might have to address.
Matt, what would be the use? So I think you're talking about kind of a separate issue, which is that like Carpenter managing your ODCR for you and scaling it up on
Hmm.
your
Oh,
which I think
Well,
Gar
there's that, but even if it's a static amount, like you're just saying, like I want 30 instances of this type, for this node attached to this node pool, like Carpenter could fail to request that static 30. So it's just like this is just the issue with how the ODCR like API works in general or service.
interesting. I think we never had issues asking for.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be different. Yeah, I
We
don't know.
yeah, we personally had to go through our AWS rep several times in order to get to have them create the ODCR for us because capacity wasn't available of a particular type we wanted.
it was creating the ODCR, not the OD instance within the ODCR. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Got it. That makes sense.
Interesting.
I was like, I think once you have the ODCR, you can't fail to launch the OD because you've
That's
already paid.
correct.
Yeah.
Well, there's a state of this is the desired amount versus this is how much has actually been
Yeah.
fulfilled. Yeah.
Yeah.
But once you have it fulfilled, then yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing here is Carpenter has to be aware of the capacity
Yeah.
that you have in your ODCR,
Yeah.
Okay.
which you basically like one thing we talked about is like a capacity. Like right now we have like an availability metric inside of our instance types. Going back to this, like this, where is it? Oh, inside of the offering, I guess. This, which basically says yes, no, I can launch this. So you'd have to have like a number associated with this thing.
Okay. That makes sense.
Because you like need Carpenter to be aware of the fact that it can't launch anymore inside of your, or you're going to keep trying to launch your
Right.
ECL.
That makes sense. Yeah. I think during the request process, you do specify a number, instance type, and then zone. So I think that shouldn't be too hard to to know ahead of time and then inject into a node pool.
You'd specify that option on your node class, right? Not in the node pool.
Yes.
It'd be
Yes,
like
yeah. That'll be part of launch lamp. Yeah,
be
that's
like a
correct. Yeah.
capacity reservation ID that would get passed down like
Right,
in some
right.
but instance type call would like know that you only have so
Yep.
much capacity to use.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
There's one other extension case, if you don't mind me tagging onto this one. When you create the CRs, you can specify an instant eligibility, which is open or targeted. So if you've got Carpenter which is unable to be defined to a CR, but it is in a targeted state, then we can't use those CRs that are in a targeted state. So that could be a good use case with limitations on AWS for those targeted eligibilities to start tapping into CRs that have been created through targeted.
Nice.
Open ODCRs.
Open should be fine because then I imagine Carpenter would see the availability and be able to spin up those nodes, but you can create them as targeted, which means they're not picked up unless something calls to that CR directly. Is that my understanding from it at least?
Yeah, I'm
That
trying to
sounds
remember
new. Yeah.
with open CRs if you need to specify the ID as part of the launch, right? You don't, right? They
Yeah,
just get...
open you don't. Open is if you have a CR for 500 C5s, so 8XLs, and you launch an 8XL, it will take it from that pool because it's available for your account or whoever shared that CR across multiple accounts.
That works today, right? We're just talking about targeted ODCR. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I was adding in an additional case where you may want to target or specify a CR, but that when you're targeting through Carpenter, that it wouldn't pick up from those CRs.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll drag something up for the design for that. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, moving on, Matt.
Sorry.
No worries, no worries.
I want to check back in on termination grace period. Hasn't really gone anywhere for a bit. And I know you guys have been busy with 0.34 release, but just want to see if this is if this is good to move forward.
Yeah, so I think generally we're accepting of the RFC. I know that there's some stuff that Jonathan put on like the RFC most recently that we need to bring in some work for V1 and move some of the specs around for V1. I think we're generally agreed here that I think we can, once we get that laundry list and the RFC out for that, that we can go ahead and move forward on that, on this.
Okay. So, or go ahead.
Oh, I was asking if you'd been making, I kind of like tangentially looked at your PR. Had you been making like progress on the changes over there?
Yeah, I think the PR is in a state where it's ready for at least a review. It's got tests and it's got a functional implementation. I guess the question is just like, is it the right implementation that we're looking for?
Yeah, it seems
it's
reasonable
based.
like to start reviewing it, obviously, and like move on that. I think we're pretty accepting of that at this point.
Yeah, I can go ahead and take a look at that this week or the next.
Sweet. Are we, how, do we have a plan for like what the next release is going to look like? Is it, is 1.0 supposed to be the next big release, or is there going to be a 0.35? Is it undecided?
I think 1.0 is still a few months out, so
Okay.
we'll have a number of few minor versions before that point.
Gotcha. All right. Would it be reasonable to put this into the next minor release?
Hard to know. Depends on when we release. I think it's,
Okay.
I think like Nick said, like it's also dependent on, I think most likely it won't make it into the next minor version. The only reason I'm saying that is because I think like we need to, like I said, we need to formalize the API first.
Okay.
I think we should make progress on the changes we're going to make in here, but that formalization and agreement in the community, I think needs to happen before we decide to move forward on this specific iteration.
Okay.
But
So
I
it really
think like
comes down to like where the field's going to go.
pretty
Ultimately
much.
on the,
Like, I think we're pretty accepting of like the direction or the feature. It's more just like I don't want to like put something in a place and then realize we put it in the wrong place and then have to move it at V1
Okay.
and figure out how to coordinate that.
If it's not going to change locations with V1 coming out because it's already in the right spot. Then that would unblock it from being merged ahead of V1.
Yep.
I think. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
100%. Yep.
Cool. Any way to stay up to date on where the API changes are going?
I don't think we really have the date, unfortunately. Like it's like
Okay.
we're talking about like an RFC in the next couple weeks, but and then probably like a week or two of feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of like loosely the timelines we're thinking about.
Gotcha. All right. That is helpful.
Yeah, if you have your notifications on for the one Carpenter Core laundry list issue, then
Okay. The laundry list
check
issue.
it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And you had the next question too, Matt.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've been digging into this, trying to basically debug like why CI jobs were having a really rough time in our Carpenter cluster, which really I think at the end of it I got down to the nuts and bolts of just this Kates doesn't have a really good option for supporting disruption of jobs, job type pods in general. You can't really use PDBs because they're not really designed for jobs, and pre-stop hooks have a number of bad trade-offs. I've tried to kind of summarize this at the very bottom of this issue, uh, which is mainly that if for GitLab CI in particular, if you try to do like a pre-stop hook, which was like my initial like this is probably the way to solve all of this, then that will block like manual termination of a job. Like if a user goes and tries to cancel a pipeline that's running, then it will wait out the entire pre-stop hook, which basically is going to just wait for the job to complete before that cancel will go through. So this is really like a Kate's problem in that like we don't have like different ways to say like I want to strongly terminate this job versus like weakly terminate. GitLab CI could go in and set it up such that like canceling a job through their UI is like a forced termination of the pods. But then you have other issues where they're like after script things don't work correctly and other stuff like that. So like it's not a good spot ultimately. I don't really have good answers unless somebody has bright ideas around how this is supposed to work.
So the pre-stop is supposed to respect also termination grace period seconds too, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm guessing that's part of also why you want that as well, or do you not want that?
My initial thought was that I was trying to we found out that do not disrupt wasn't working correctly 100%. And we're like, okay, like fine, that's not working 100% correctly, if that's okay. Maybe we go and try to solve this the correct way, which is the autoscaler agnostic way, which is just like let's handle disruption at the Kates level for these job pods, and found out that that is also not going to work for a couple of reasons that are GitLab CI specific, but kind of general patterns across many different job type patterns. So,
Was
did you
it
have?
sorry, I was trying to ask, is the do not disrupt annotation not working for expire after because it gets rescheduled and the node never gets expired? Or is it also the issue that you linked where do not disrupt pod is scheduled, but it's not respected and then terminated through consolidation?
I think that my understanding is that evict after also goes through the typical disruption flow, which does do not disrupt blocks, but I haven't confirmed this myself yet. But my suspicion is that this blocks all disruption, including like expire after, uh, and thus it would block termination grace period as well.
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm asking is when like the job like goes down like or like it terminates and then a new replica comes up, you're saying that the pod gets rescheduled to this expired node and thus that node is never expired. Is that the problem that you're going into?
Uh, no, it's just kind of the case that you can have a pod that blocks. Taking disregarding jobs entirely, just pretend you have a pod running forever. If it has that do not disrupt annotation, then you can never have that node expire. Like if you have expire set to 30 days for like security reasons or whatever, then that pod's going to block it forever.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we've talked about having do not disrupt be like a grace period where you can
Mm-hmm.
define rather than true, it'd be like some duration where it's
Yeah.
respected. Is that solve the issue for you or like part of the
Uh,
issue?
it's I think it's still kind of a hack. Like I ultimately see that this annotation itself is kind of like a hack around like a deeper problem. but I also don't have a good solution that works apart from this annotation for now. So yeah, I think also Garvin had something to say and their hand raised for a bit.
Oh no, I was just gonna ask like, no, I think I didn't fully understand the question, so I was thinking, yeah. So
What
no
about,
question for me.
I think the key
Yeah.
problem, if I remember correctly, is that we introduced the sanitation. We were wanting to get rid of it. This was, of course, like, I don't know, a year and a half ago or something.
Yeah.
And did you like track down the whole thread and everything?
No, I mean, I understand the desire to want to get rid of it. I also want to get
Yeah.
rid of it. And I tried very hard to get my teams to not use it for the CI jobs in general. And then we kind of ran out of options. But
It's the key problem I'm forgetting. It's something like PDBs don't let you do max unavailable on like just on selector or something like that. And so you have to do min available, which doesn't work for jobs because it spins up pods ad hoc.
PDBs, I think, would work. It's very clunky to have to create an entire PDB resource one-to-one with like a very ephemeral job that sometimes only runs for seconds and then is gone. And so like GitLab CI also doesn't support the creation of PDBs alongside its job pods either, just out of the box.
Can't you do it on selectors though?
Oh, so you're saying like have a stock PDB that automatically select? Yeah, but I don't think it's gonna. That's potentially an interesting idea. I can look at that more. Yeah.
I thought that I'm just trying to recall because it was a while ago.
Yeah, because
It
you'd
was
basically set a PDB that blocks disruption of any of the pods and then select all of the pods, right? Would be like the idea.
I thought it was something like you can't do max unavailable on like stuff that doesn't have the replicas field and
Maybe.
something like
Right, I
that.
Yeah.
think it needs a replica set or something.
Oh, the PDB selects the replica set effectively,
Yeah, yeah.
not the
And
pods. Yeah.
right, and job doesn't have that.
Yeah, it's somewhere in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, only min unavailable can be used, not max unavailable. So we really just need a feature in Kubernetes that says you could do max unavailable on selector arbitrarily.
Maybe. Yeah, that might help. But it's really like I don't even know if PDBs are the right way to approach this problem because they're
It,
really targeted at a different use case entirely. So
Maybe with your issue, is the issue like just long running pods not allowing nodes to be reaped, or is it you don't want nodes to be reaped when it jobs running on there?
it's both. It depends on
Okay.
which way you go. So you can either right now say screw the pods, like we're going to reap the node and your pods are going to be destroyed.
Yeah.
And then that results in a lot of lost work because a lot of times these pods
Yep.
have to run for a long time and to make progress and they lose it all if they die.
Yep.
And then it's at the other end of the spectrum, it's we don't know like these pods could run forever and that's not acceptable to like cluster maintenance. So we need to be able to kill them at a certain point at a limit, like reasonably. And that's right now there's not really good ways to do that.
I wonder if rather than do not disrupt, if like you give it TTL instead, like you don't want to disrupt, but I give you this much time to run before you die.
That's effectively what the termination grace period of a node
Right.
is. Yeah.
Right.
It's just we can't really leverage it at the moment because
Right.
the pre-stop hooks don't work like for all of the use cases that we want to support, which is being able to do like a soft cancel of the job to say like, hey, run until you're done, but
Right.
also you're going to die at this point later, and a hard cancel from like the UI. Like there's no like differentiation between those two use cases because both of them are just a pod delete, which then invokes the pre-stop hook. Yeah. So
Right.
that's why I'm saying this is like a bigger issue across like all of Kubernetes for things that fit this kind of pattern. And I don't think we can really solve it with just Karpenter.
You should do grace period 0 on pods.
Grace
We need
periods?
grace period 0 on pods to like set the termination grace period of the pod to 0, and therefore the pre-stop hook wouldn't run because it just gets a
Yeah. But the greater problem is that there is no like prescriptive best practice for how to handle this stuff. So yeah, maybe that is the case, is that like Kate's just needs to say like, hey, if you're going to do this type of workload, then like make sure like whenever you need to do a hard delete that you do these exact things, such as setting the termination grace period to 0 and then killing it or whatever. But then that's also going to have other ramifications around like kind of graceful cleanup in that hard termination case.
To solve it from the carpenter's perspective, can we treat jobs special? Like begin terminating our termination process. So we begin on the node, our tainting it so nothing else can be scheduled, evict the other pods, but we'd have a timeout for jobs to say, hey, jobs can keep running. And we could have that configurable, either let jobs continue forever if that's what the cluster operator wants, or have a timeout after that tainting has happened, after that process started. Be like, we'll wait a maximum of 1 hour, and then we'll kill it or reap it. Something like that.
Yeah.
Sound reasonable?
Something like that is helpful. Like if you could still do kind of a partial disruption process of the node, so you can start deletion of the node and all of that stuff without actually doing, yeah, basically you wouldn't do all of the disruption steps, such as like punning off all the nodes, but you would do like a pre-disruption step that might help the problem. Yeah.
How's that tangibly different from using the, I guess because you don't have to specify the annotation, it's a little bit nicer, but
yeah, but you're still going to have to do something like specify the annotation. Otherwise, Carpenter doesn't know that it needs to do this, because obviously you wouldn't want to do all these like extra, like you wouldn't want to like wait a certain amount of time to. I don't know how to think more about it.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, like, if you were treating job special, I didn't see how that was like tangibly different aside from the annotation that you would have to add.
You don't have to have every person add the annotation, right? You'd still want the annotation there because there's custom controllers that launch things that are like jobs, but they're not Kubernetes jobs. I just think it would be nice to have jobs, automatically without the annotation, get that ability or get that favoritism.
Yeah, I had like the issue before regarding like being able to customize the finalizer, and I wonder if I'm happy to leave that dead, but then like having some control over like how finalization happens against that has like more customized logic that you makes sense for you. Like, oh, I know a job doesn't for with these labels cannot die just yet. I can control that rather than Carpenter having generalized or consume these like weird edge cases. Like, oh, jobs don't do anything just yet because it can be long running, but then we don't want it to be too long running and stuff like that. Like rather than that being in the main repo of Carpenter, does it make sense to like open that up for like other people to change how finalization might be different for like other use cases? But yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it feels at the end there's sort of a finalization customization issue. I don't know. Yeah.
I guess as like an adjacent topic to this, this fix that I've applied and patched in our clusters to Carpenter basically just adds a 30-second sleep to the do not disrupt logic, so that once the node is tainted, it waits 30 seconds, then rechecks to see if any do not disrupt pods have scheduled there, and then untaints the node and says, never mind, don't destroy that one if so. So yeah, we did hit like we were hitting this constantly, even though it's a pretty precise race condition that I couldn't produce in my test cluster easily at all.
It's a schedulability thing, right? It's like the pod, you don't see the pod scheduled, but the pod did schedule. Yeah.
Yep. It's totally possible that the 30-second sleep is overkill. It could just be like a 10-second sleep instead, but I have no idea. So.
Yeah, specifically on the issue, I know that specifically on the issue, I know that Jason is starting to work on this specific GitHub issue. So
awesome. Okay.
Yeah, maybe we might see some more progress on that in the upcoming weeks. So you can just check that.
Yeah, that'd be great. I would personally put this as a blocker for V1, this particular thing, simply because the annotation doesn't do what it claims to do, which is confusing and jarring for users to diagnose like why Carpenter's evicting things that are marked as unevictable. But curious to hear y'all's thoughts.
Yeah, it seems like what you did is about what we were thinking. Like you fundamentally need to like taint the thing and like operate with a right operation on the thing so you can be assured that you like won't see any additional pod schedule unless they specifically tolerate that taint, which we can just say like they shouldn't after that point in time, and like give a certain amount of time after that to validate those changes. Are you, I guess you're, so the patch that you made with the 30 seconds, that's after it's made its decision, right? It's after
Yeah, if you
the
scroll up, there's a link to the exact change, which is not super complicated. Right, that's that GitHub pull. Yeah. So, uh, yeah, so right after it does the require no schedule taint and applies it to the nodes, then we just sleep for 30. And then we do a check to verify that the no schedule taint is there and that there's no pods. So, and it removes the taint if it can't find, or if for each node that it can't, or that it finds a do not disrupt pod on, and removes it from the candidates that are going to be disrupted.
What are your thoughts on the other proposal that we had for the like basically on a disruption operation or a disruption condition being satisfied, we taint the node. So the idea would be that like one of the issues we ran into beyond what you're talking about with the race condition is that you can consistently reschedule do not disrupt pods onto the same node, even if the node has met a condition, which I think is what Nick was talking about. So like you have an expiry, you have a drift operation, you have like a security reason for wanting to drift your nodes, but then you keep getting do not disrupt pods that reschedule to that node,
Yeah.
or maybe blocking PDBs or something like that that
Yep.
reschedule, and you
Well,
don't get rid of it. I mean, it would really be job operations where you're going to have pods that are going to finish and get rid
yeah,
of themselves in the node. But
I'm not super worried about the block or the PDBs case because that's what like termination grace period is designed to cover that. Once like the disruption phase for a node starts, it should die after 24 hours or whatever you've configured it to. The problem is that if the do not disrupt annotation blocks the start of the disruption process, then we never start that timer ticking. And
PDBs have the same problem though. PDBs, like because Carpenter
oh
considers
god,
PDBs as part of its disruption operation, it has the same issue. So this is why
I see.
we've
Okay,
talked a little bit about like either doing do not
yeah.
disrupt with like a timeout on the do not disrupt, which is only going to solve it for do not disrupt,
Mhm.
or talking about like a toleration for like a toleration seconds for disruption, where you say I've been disrupted with this condition for this amount of time, and it's been enough time, just blow through the
Yep.
PDB and do not disrupt.
Okay, this knowledge means that my other PR is basically incomplete because it's not going to work for the case that I originally designed it for, which is like even in the event of like PDBs and stuff and drift reconciliation. So what I'm probably going to have to do is think about this and go back to the drawing board and try to like understand like where the right place is to do it. But it's probably going to be some kind of refactor of how the disruption logic works.
This is you're talking about the termination grace period PR.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's still relevant in the manual termination.
Oh, it's definitely still relevant. Yeah. And that's how I was doing all the testing with it, was just manually deleting nodes and then watching like what happened. So I didn't actually test it with like a PDB blocking case. Well, I did test it with a PDB case, but it was on a node that I explicitly deleted. So not just like I didn't trigger anything through drift. Yeah.
I don't know that code that well, but then does it taint and then check if there's anything and then untaint? No, that's your code. Okay.
Yeah, that's what this patch is doing.
Okay.
But
right.
I'll be on vacation for the next week and I'll try to think about this.
On vacation.
It's a good time to just kind of like let ideas roll around, I think.
Let them marinate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Moving on, Jonathan, you want to talk about the persistent volumes and VMEs?
Yeah, I was just marveling at the number of notes we took. That's crazy. Yeah, so there was a PR open. I think it just, or sorry, hold on. It's a local static. There was a PR that was open for this issue, and I made a comment on this morning actually. I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts on it or is familiar with like using PVCs with at least on AWS with NVMe and like SSDs directly attached to the node. But there was basically a PR that somebody had opened, I guess, a little while back on an issue with using these local NVMe storage as PVCs on your clusters, because Carpenter isn't aware of like limits on these NVMe based, or I guess on the PVs for these nodes. So it basically is not aware of the fact that like okay, there's two SSDs that are mounted as PVC or as PVs, and I see that I have enough memory and CPU, so I think I can schedule my pods at this node. But in fact, I have like 10 pods that need PVCs or that need these PVs, and I'm not aware of the fact that I can only launch 2 on this specific node. And so what I actually need to do is I need to launch 5 nodes, but I don't have the ability, like Carpenter is just unaware of that fact. And part of the problem is that like this local static provisioner, or there's been some iterations of it, but I think the original implementation like doesn't surface volume limits anywhere. And it'd be really nice if like Carpenter already discovers volume limits for CSI. So it'd be really nice if like this thing could just like surface limits in a way that Carpenter could just automatically reason about. And it doesn't use CSI, so it's a little bit problematic there. And I'm trying to talk with SIG storage a little bit more on like what the right mechanism is here. But there's like one problem, which is Carpenter doesn't know the limits. So ideally it would be like, okay, I know that I have a certain number of mount paths on my node, and therefore that's the number of volumes I can mount against this particular node. And if I've hit my limit, then I should keep launching more nodes. And then the other thing is we don't currently handle, so those PVs, when they get attached to a pod, they come with hostname affinity because they can only be attached to that specific node. And so one thing that Carpenter doesn't handle correctly today, if I doesn't handle correctly is maybe a little bit of a stretch, but it doesn't handle gracefully, is that those pods are attached to that node. Like maybe you have a PVC that's bound to that PV on that node, and therefore it acquires the like requirement that it must run on that node in Carpenter's eyes. So the problem is that we don't, when we're actually doing replacement simulations for like disruption, like expiry drift, anything, we think that that pod can still only schedule against that node, and so we block any kind of replacement operation against it. And so the question, I'm curious if this sounds, one, I'm curious if anyone has any experience with this, but two, I'm curious if this sounds reasonable to anyone else, is that we're thinking we can just basically throw out the hostname node affinity for our scheduling algorithm when you're using like a local or a host path PV, because in those cases, like it's clear that there's going to be a node affinity attached to the host name. And if we were to launch a new node, you would probably like with this local provisioner, generally speaking, the PVC will get cleaned up. The PV will get cleaned up when the node is deleted because it's gone. And you would get a new PVC and a new PV that would then be able to bind to that new pod that got spun up on the new node.
Maybe the safest thing is to gate that behavior behind some kind of like opt-in annotation on the pod.
Yeah, we were thinking about either
yeah.
on the pod or on the PV.
Yeah.
I guess I'm skeptical of cases where, like, what are the cases where you would want Carpenter to respect that hostname affinity?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that we use local volumes for a couple like very niche use cases, so I'm not super familiar with them. Just thinking about it from like the like what is possible perspective.
Because the alternative, yeah, I agree from like what's possible. It's uh like like the only use case I can think of is you want to block Carpenter from replacing the node.
Right.
But
how does that help you? Yeah.
exactly. Like you could do it through other mechanisms too. Like you could use do not disrupt, which we're talking about, or you could potentially disable consolidation on a specific node pool or disable any kind of disruption on the node pool. And I think there's other ways you could potentially just block the node from being spun down. Yeah. Elmika, you had a thought?
Yeah, there might be certain situations where there are like security and compliance reasons for having to have the host name in there, as opposed to relying on it being coming from like, a host path PV or something. And I think like while I think it's a nice upgrade to like help people out, like a user experience kind of upgrade, I wouldn't want to see the option closed out in a way where, if you had an organization that said we require host name, matching on all these things to ensure that nothing could sneak in the back door or whatever, but aside from that, like, I think what you're talking about is like a convenience feature.
I mean, they're completely broken on Carpenter's replacement operations, right? If you have a hostname affinity across every PV today.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. That to me seems like, I don't know, there's another mechanism in there somewhere, but
yeah. I think, Jonathan, you're aware of our database service that has very, very stateful needs. That's our big usage of local volumes for the NVMe. They need it for a hot cache. So what they have is they have their own tool that just swaps out the root EBS volume and reschedules the pod on the exact same EC2 node after the fact as a way of keeping that cache warmed up without having to rewarm it. That's another thing that could be interesting, that keeps that data on the exact same host, even though we're drift, for AMI or whatever is changing.
Wait, so it uses like an EBS backup to keep like the cache up to date with the NVMe volume? Like how do you?
No, so we terminate the node and then swap out the root volume, keeping the data on the NVMe drive on the other drive of the same machine, right?
Interesting. Yeah, I'd be interested to. You're in the Kubernetes Slack, right, Jeremy?
Yeah.
We should talk more on that because I don't fully grasp how like what specifically you're doing, but I'd be interested to understand like the use case there.
Sure. Yeah, we can chat more there if you want.
I guess in the interest of time, we only have 2 minutes left, and it looks like there's three items left on the agenda. I know Bryce, we've been talking about this for a while, and I don't think that 2 minutes will really do justice to the problem in the discussion. David, do you have an update on
Sure.
the docs neutrality?
Well, yeah, it's pretty much stalled. And so I think we just need to, I think, make a decision on what we want to do. Because I've been to SIG docs, I've been to the tech docs people. Both of the sessions are recorded if you desire. But at the end of the day, like we just have to make a decision on what we want to do. I wouldn't say there's been any massive revelations, but I also haven't had I would say any aversions necessarily to what I'm proposing. So I guess it's kind of one of those things where we got to do something, because right now the Carpenter.sh docs are all basically AWS only, which is not great. And I know there's a backlog issue on that. And so it just becomes, what is it that we want to do? I have a proposal and I haven't seen any better proposal. I'm open to other ideas, but yeah, it's kind of where we are. It's no, on my side, Bryce and folks have made some comments. You guys have kind of made some comments, and no one's really making a decision to move forward. So I've got a PR open on the Azure side. That's kind of the start of that pattern. But yeah, I need somebody to actually, help move things forward in one way or another.
Yeah, I remember last time we were talking about this, there's talk of having some like other meeting that we can work on outside of this so that it's like
Yeah, I've been to all those. Yeah, I mean, like a separate one, like just with a group.
yeah, just within our group so that we can kind of talk to. I don't know if that's
Okay.
exactly what you need, but I think we had some sort of AI to have a separate meeting that we can with some occurrence that we can start talking about this and making sure that we keep meeting until it gets solved.
Okay. Yeah, I could set that up. I don't know if maybe you want to put down who on your side, the Carpenter Core maintainer side wants to be involved there, and I can get something set up with us. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can sync up on the Kubernetes Slack for that.
Okay.
We should, if we're going to do that, we should also propose I forget I'll make it honestly probably knows well as well, but just like we need to propose a change to our community documentation around feature group like working times. So like anyone that was interested in attending could see. So like in our README, for instance, we need to like update the fact that we were having like a feature group working group for that amount of time to figure out the doc story. I think there may be something we need to do in community as well, but I forget.
Team, a quick question. There have been some features that we're looking for can you open the last document, the Karpenter feature request? Yeah. Sorry, I know it's a little bit late. We're almost at the time, but there are these issues that have been created, and these are kind of critical for us to roll out Karpenter in our company. Basically, the first issue is that the consolidation after doesn't work for underutilized case. It only works for when the node is under the empty case, right? So any updates on this to be
Yeah,
fixed?
we're targeting this one for V1. We don't have any more updates on it right now, but
Okay.
we're definitely targeting it for V1.
May I know what is the expected timelines for V1?
Couple months to 6 months. It really depends on a lot of other things, but
Okay. So,
in the order of months.
okay, sounds good. The other thing is, I wanted to check, are you going to support no drain timeout with the Karpenter? That's a second issue, because this is affecting us quite heavily, even with the regular Kubernetes thing. The
Yeah,
drain.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Scroll down to the bottom of that issue. Yeah, it's right there. I talked about it earlier.
Okay. So, sure. Cool. So this is getting fixed, is what I understand.
Yeah,
But
we're also interested. I'm writing the PR. It's yeah, it's desired.
cool.
So
Awesome.
you're not alone. Yeah.
The last thing is, this is one thing that we faced, that when Carpenter brings up a node, depending on the number of pending pods, um, it probably chooses not the right size node for those set of requests. It probably is choosing a higher order instance, and then it is consolidating to the right size node at a later time. Is there a way to get this, uh, pick up the right instance size in the first go rather than doing bunch of these rotations? We had provided all the logs and other things for this to make you aware that this issue is something that we have been running into on a consistent basis. So
Yeah, I think this is probably better done to like a separate bug bash session rather than in the working group. But because there's a lot of stuff that needs to be just like parsed together. Um, we'll make sure we'll make sure it seems like if it's pretty interesting. It's pretty important too. So we'll make sure that we tackle this and look at this.
all right, thank you.
Yeah, I think the last one is that Bryce. Sorry, we couldn't get to your discussion. It seems like if anyone wants to drop off, I guess they can drop off. But um, if do you want to talk about it a little bit, or do you want to maybe we can just talk about this with in Carpenter Dev and try and
We could do
get
it
some more
async.
thoughts?
Really, all of these things could be talked about async.
Okay.
Really, the two big things is like we've talked about the semantics, like should things be called a reason, method, or action? And then the other bit is like, do we want budgets to count for like all disruptions or disruptions by reason? I explain more what that means, and I link the discussion threads. So if async people want to just go there, read that, and leave their thoughts on the two, that would be helpful. I have a PR that's implemented and tested for my preferred approach as well. Uh, so this is just the conversation on methods or whatever. So if people just want to, I'll post those in Carpenter Dev as well. We can chat there. Don't want to take too much time, but those are the two things. They're like the last two clarifying questions, and I implemented the second equation I talk about in the stock. So the one where we consider the total number of disrupting, not the total number of disrupting by a specific reason. Uh, I talk more about why in the doc.
Yeah. All right. Let's try and do that through Carpenter Dev and to the PR. But
Thank you.
thanks for joining everyone. It's a good talk, good discussion. Yeah, have a good one, everyone.